This is the story of the incomparable Jones family. It started with their oldest ancestor, Charles. In the 1780s, slave traders were actively capturing Africans for the American slave trade. Charles and his two brothers were captured and brought on a slave ship, a trip so miserable that 1 in 5 Africans didn't survive. When the ship docked, his brothers tried to escape, and they were caught and killed. Charles was sold into bondage and eventually went to the Jeffries plantation of North Carolina. Charles' son Allen was born in 1794 into slavery, as all such children were. Masters encouraged their slaves to have offspring because it increased a slaveholder's holdings. Frederick Douglass wrote about watching an estate's value being counted. He saw human property being counted the same as livestock, a man the same as a horse, a woman the same as a cow, a child worth the same as a pig. Despite his conditions, Allen Jones became so skilled as a blacksmith that he earned money from extra work done in what little free time he had. He was industrious and determined to earn his freedom. He secured an agreement with his owner that he could buy his freedom, and he managed to save the very large sum. But when he paid it, as they had agreed, his owner decided to keep the money and refused to honor their agreement. Undeterred, Allen started all over again, this time asking a Quaker friend to help with the transaction. Yet again, despite the sale price being much higher, about $3,000, Allen saved enough to buy his own freedom, that of his wife Temperance, his father, and 3 children. And so in 1829, it was finally done. To see the actual bill of sale of one human being, Charles, for $350, bought by another, his son Allen, signed by Master George W. Jeffries, is wrenching. It's all too real when their descendants are people that we can know. Now free, the Jones family was living near Raleigh, North Carolina. Allen believed that education was the way to a better life, a belief that would endure through the Jones family for generations, but not one to simply enjoy his own hard-earned safety. He boldly built a school for black children. Now, it was illegal then for slaves to learn to read and write, so most slaves and freed slaves were illiterate. Resistance was powerful, as were the laws, and in 1830, after the slave rebellion led by Nat Turner, the pressure intensified. In fact, one slave owner told his daughter, who caught one of her slaves trying to read, that he would have cut the right hand off of any slave who tried it. Fear of blacks being educated was fierce. Frederick Douglass wrote, "Once a person was literate, they were unfit to be slaves." So perhaps it was no surprise that the school that Allen built was destroyed by local whites. He rebuilt it, and it was destroyed again and again. In 1842, he talked about it at a meeting in New York, and when he returned, a mob dragged him from his home and whipped him. The local newspaper said that it was justified for the sake of the law. So, with his life at risk, Allen sold his property, 2 acres, a home, and a blacksmith shop, loaded up the family in a wagon, and left North Carolina for good. On the way west, they learned about Oberlin, Ohio, a stop on the Underground Railroad that welcomed blacks. If you made it to Oberlin, you made it to freedom. You didn't have to hide. You were accepted. Perhaps even more important for Allen, it was the home to the first white school to admit black students. The Langston brothers were admitted in 1835, and 2 years later, it was the first to accept women. By 1900, it would grant a third of all the undergraduate degrees received by black professionals in the country. The Langston's younger brother became the first black elected official in Congress, and his grandson was Langston Hughes, the famous poet of the Harlem Renaissance. 6 of Allen and Temperance Jones's sons attended college in Oberlin, but not their sister, Bethina, called Bethany, which her brother James, who would eventually have 4 daughters, would remember. But blacks were encouraged to continue north to Canada because of the fugitive slave law, which said that if you found a slave, you were expected to return the individual because they were technically stolen property, and if you didn't, you could be fined or imprisoned. Even free blacks were at risk of capture and re-enslavement, with no right to trial. So in 1849, Allen's oldest son, James Monroe Jones, joined a group seeking safety across the border in Chatham, Ontario. They bought 800 acres, built 200 homes, and began cultivating the land. James had learned blacksmithing skills from his father, and he added engraving and gunsmithing. He became known as the finest gunsmith Canada ever produced and one of the most gifted west of London. They called him Gunsmith Jones. But despite his reputation, he still experienced the sting of his race. He won award after award for his work, and he was chosen to make pistols for the Prince of Wales when he came for a visit in 1860. But they would not be given to the future king because at the last minute it was discovered that the beautiful pistols were made by the hands of a colored man. James would be appointed as a magistrate for life and would be remembered as the most polite man in his community. In Canada, James had married Emily Frances, and they had 4 daughters, Anna, Sophia, Frederica, and Emily, and 2 sons, George and William. 4 of their children would eventually come to Monrovia, California. Remembering that his sister could not attend Oberlin College, James was adamant that his daughters could, and they did. All 4 graduated from college, a rare accomplishment for women in the 1870s. Nearly impossible for women of color. Slavery was finally outlawed in the U.S. in 1865, and 5 years later, all men, regardless of their race, were considered equal under the law, and they had the right to vote. But not women. That wouldn't happen for 50 more years. This is the story of what James and Emily's daughters faced. It was counterbalanced by what they inherited from their forebears: intelligence, skill, determination, and the ability to overcome the toughest obstacles to accomplish the extraordinary. They made their own educational opportunities, they opened them for others as was done for them, and they used their capabilities fully with the strength and force of will in their DNA. James and Emily Jones' first daughter was Anna Holland Jones. She was born in Chatham in 1855. She moved to Oberlin, Ohio, to attend high school, and she graduated from college in 1875 with a literary degree. She furthered her education by studying at Wilberforce University before she began to teach there. The college held her in such high esteem that it awarded her an honorary Master of Arts degree in 1892 and a Bachelor of Philosophy degree in 1893. She then embarked on her life's calling, giving African Americans, especially women and girls, access to a higher education. Her first teaching assignment was at the Lincoln Institute, where she taught for 4 years. The Institute is now Lincoln University, an historically black college in Jefferson City, Missouri. In 1884, her birthday gift was a gold locket engraved by her father. It reads, "Presented to Annie H. Jones by her pa, September 2nd, 1884. By 1885, Anna was teaching at Wilberforce University, named for William Wilberforce, who led the effort to end the slave trade out of England. This was a time when colleges were finally becoming open to black Americans. Anna taught literature, history, and zoology and became the Dean of Women at Wilberforce. Wilberforce awarded her an honorary master's degree in 1892. She accepted a promotion that year to Kansas City, Missouri, and was the first black female teacher at Lincoln High School, a school that was started to help freed slaves. In 1911, she became the first African-American principal in Kansas City at Douglas High School. Her friendship with fellow activist Josephine Yates launched her into the club movement in 1893. Together, they established the Kansas City's Colored Women's League, which ultimately joined what became the National Association of Colored Women. That national organization was led by Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, and it was connected with Harriet Tubman, who had escaped from slavery and returned 13 times to rescue others. The clubs built schools, ran orphanages, founded homes for the aged, set up kindergarten programs, and formed agencies to help female migrants from the South find jobs and affordable housing. Their motto was "Lifting as we climb." Her connection with the renowned W.E.B. Du Bois says volumes about her status about the Black intellectual elite. Du Bois was the first African American to earn a Ph.D. from Harvard, co-founder of the NAACP, and creator of the Crisis magazine. He led the Niagara Movement, which was the civil rights group that preceded the NAACP. He believed that African Americans needed chances for advanced education to develop their full potential for leadership. So did Anna. Together, they promoted women's right to vote. He published her article in the 1915 issue of The Crisis, in which she wrote, "Of the four great institutions of human uplift, the home, the school, the church, and the state, woman has a direct controlling force in the first three institutions. In the state, her influence at present is indirect. Since her control in the three is unquestioned, should she not have the legal means, the ballot, to widen and deepen her work?" Anna was a prolific writer about the causes of equality, voting rights for women, education, and the status of the American Black woman. Her voice was important in the early civil rights movement. Her article, A Century's Progress of the American Colored Women, appeared in the 1905 Voice of the Negro, the first Southern periodical edited by African Americans. It featured Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Her importance brought invitations to speak internationally. In 1900, she was one of two Black women to speak at the first Pan-African Conference in London. She traveled with Du Bois to the World's Fair in Paris for the Negro Exposition, which he and Booker T. Washington of the Tuskegee Institute created to counter images of blacks as inferior. She wrote, "There is no inherent inferiority which education will not remove." Anna fought against a degrading narrative that labeled Black women as morally deficient, blaming them for their own plight as victims of sexual violence. Anna H. Jones embodied dignity, intelligence, culture, and refinement, as every photograph of her shows. They also reveal her sheer force of will. In 1904, she became the first single Black woman to purchase a home in Kansas City. It was on Montgall Avenue, a single block of African American professionals, teachers, a high school principal with a master's degree from Cornell, editor of the Call newspaper, a doctor, the owner of a car dealership, and the granddaughter of Frederick Douglass. But Black residents were not welcome, regardless of their merits. Some whites claimed it would reduce the value of their homes. Pressure mounted, and in just 1 year, 1911, 5 of the 9 homes on the block were dynamited, including the home of the high school teacher living next door to Anna. The police gave no help, and the insurance company refused to pay their claim. Anna wrote about it in a letter to W.E.B. Du Bois. The Crisis magazine wrote, "For years, after she had bought her quiet and beautiful home on Montgall Avenue, Kansas City, she became a storm setter because the whites were determined she should not live there. They intimidated her, they wrote threats, threw bombs, but with amazing courage, she continued to live there." The details are in a stirring book by Margie Carr with the help of Renee Cochet, Anna's great-grandniece. Today, Anna's home is listed on the African American Heritage Trail of Kansas City, Missouri, and recognized with a marker on the National Votes for Women Trail. In 1919, Anna retired from her 40-year career as an educator, and she moved to Monrovia, California, joining her sisters Sophia and Emily and her brother George and his family. They lived at 1301 South Shamrock in a home that George had built. She headed the large household where they had an orange ranch next to the house on what is now Los Angeles Street. Monrovia had a vibrant Black community, and it offered a health respite. Anna's belief in the power of clubs and the resolve to give African American girls access to higher education never waned. In 1920, she created the Anna H. Jones Club in Monrovia. To this day, the club gives college scholarships. Following Anna, it was led by presidents like Jenny Lockett, Mattie Buller, and Eldora Polk, who was later elected to the school board. The list of recipients is long, with Anna's great-nephew Edwin Thompson, Lois Gaston, former mayor of Duarte, Joni Golar-Ewell, first Black female student body president of Monrovia High, Ron Husband, Disney's first African-American animator, and star athlete and artist John Parker. Anna passed away at the age of 77. Her death was noted in Du Bois' The Crisis magazine. It said, Anna Jones was a leader of women and in general was a fine and cultured influence in many kinds of work for social uplift. All this brought her prominence and praise, but it did not stay race prejudice. 20 years ago, the article went on to say, the death of Anna Jones would have aroused the whole West, but she has been retired since 1919 and has lived quietly in California. Anna was laid to rest in Monrovia's Live Oak Cemetery in an unmarked grave. Sophia Bethina, known as Bethany Jones, was the second daughter of James Monroe Jones and his wife Emily. Sophia was born in Chatham, Canada in 1857, likely named for her aunt Bethina. Since Canada had separate schools for Black students, the last one of which only closed in 1965, Sophia received her early education in a school for Black students. She then attended Wilberforce Collegiate Institute, which was designed specifically to prepare students from segregated schools to enter an integrated university. She was accepted at the University of Toronto in 1879, an achievement in itself. But after that, Sophia decided she wanted to be a doctor. She was denied entry to the University of Toronto's medical school, not because she wasn't capable, but because she was Black. So she taught school for a year, and then with her Jones family determination gene, she emigrated to the U.S. and applied to the University of Michigan's medical school. In 1885, she became the first African-American female to graduate from that school with a medical degree. And the school's website claims pride in that, but it also says that students of color face discrimination in medical student housing, clerkships, and residency training, at least until the World War II era. But in time, the school would name a lectureship in infectious diseases after her, some conference facilities, and a scholarship fund for her and a Black male colleague. Unlike her sister Anna, she seems unimposing in photographs. Diminutive, maybe a bit delicate, perhaps quiet, but her life story shows that she was no less courageous or powerful. Her life would blend education and medicine. She would teach about and practice medicine and do pioneering work in public health for nearly 4 decades. In 1885, she began to teach at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Spelman was established in 1881, just 4 years before, with $100 and 11 African-American, mostly illiterate students. J.P. Morgan had been so impressed with the founder's vision of offering these students a classical education, Latin, algebra, chemistry, etc., that he funded the school's expansion, and so the school's name was changed fact, it was named after his wife and her parents, who were abolitionists. Today, Spelman is the leading educational institution for African American women, with alumni like novelist Alice Walker and Marian Wright Edelman, who founded the Children's Defense Fund. Sophia was the first black female faculty at Spelman, and she created its first nursing school. It would be the first training school for nurses in the South. In 1887, a letter of recommendation was written about her to Booker T. Washington, which said, "She is one of the brainiest colored women in the country and belongs to a family famous throughout the West for scholarship, culture, and refinement. I know of no other lady whom I can so freely recommend to you." Sophia then taught at Wilberforce University, as Anna had, and was its resident physician. She moved to other cities. She taught nursing in St. Louis. She practiced at the Frederick Douglass Hospital, the first Philadelphia hospital with a training school for black nurses. She lived with her sister there and 6 female boarders, one of whom was Nina DuBois, the pregnant wife of their close friend W.E. Du Bois. Clearly, they trusted her medical expertise. By 1903, she had opened a medical practice in Kansas City, where she lived with her sister Anna on Montgall Avenue. She moved quite a bit, always practicing medicine. She worked as a physician in Ann Arbor, lived with her brother George and his family. In 1913, her article, 50 Years of Negro Public Health, was published in the Annals of the American Academy of Politics and Social Science. Their contributors were considered leading experts and scholars. It was the first research publication by a black female doctor in the field of medicine. But even so, the author's name is listed as S.B. Jones, M.D., disguising the fact that the author was a woman. When she wrote it, she was the resident physician of what would become the University of North Carolina. As if breaking barriers in medicine weren't enough, she was also an inventor. She was granted a patent for a barrel trunk. Finally, with her health fragile, in 1919 she moved to Monrovia and lived with her siblings at the family home on 1301 Shamrock, and there she spent the rest of her life. She passed away in 1932, just a few months after her sister Anna. And W.E.B. Du Bois' magazine, The Crisis, wrote about her passing, calling her a pioneer in medicine. It says, "She gave her life, practically, to the care of others and the teaching of hygiene, and on the last morning she said, 'I was in hopes that I should awake in another country this morning.'" Sophia was also laid to rest in Monrovia's Live Oak Cemetery in an unmarked grave. Anna and Sophia's sister Frederica was born in 1858. She also became an accomplished educator. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 1887. She taught in 5 states, including at Wilberforce University and what became Florida A&M. She was the principal of Paul Quinn College, the oldest historically black college in Texas. She opened a private school for African American girls in Philadelphia and one in Kansas City, Missouri, where she lived with her sisters on Montgall Avenue. She's mentioned in a book of notable Negro women, which said, despite her love of obscurity, she ranks among the leading educators of the race, noting her prominence as well as her intellectual ability. She had fragile health, passing away at the age of 47 from pneumonia before her siblings moved to Monrovia. The fourth sister, Emily Priscilla, was born in 1861, and she also became a teacher after college. She worked first at an industrial school founded by a woman, an ex-slave, to give vocational training and academics to African Americans. Later, she taught English at a black private college in Virginia. She lived with Anna at the home on Montgall Avenue in Kansas City. She came to Monrovia in about 1919 and lived with her brother George and his wife Martha at first. And when her older sisters, Anna and Sophia, came, she lived with them until they passed away. Emily lived 20 years longer than her older sisters. She passed away in 1950 at the age of 88. She died within months of George's wife, Martha, and so her ashes are buried beneath Martha's, next to George's. but her grave was unmarked as well. None of the four Jones sisters ever married or had children, instead devoting their lives to their important work. Their oldest brother, George Allen Monroe Jones, named after his grandfather and his father, was a talented carpenter and craftsman. He was born in Chatham, Canada in 1863, and he came to the U.S. at about 1882. He married Martha C. Habener in 1898, and in 1900 they were living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where Sophia had gone to university. George's parents lived with them in a home that George built. George and Martha had 5 children named after relatives: Emily Carolyn, George Livingston, James Monroe, Anna Havener, and Helen Cameron. George and his family came west to Monrovia in 1919, seeking a better climate for George's asthma and a safe haven for his sisters. Anna and Sophia financed the purchase of property for a small orange ranch, on which George built a large house for their extended family at 1301 South Shamrock. Siblings Anna, Sophia, Emily, George, and his large family lived there together. One of his boys worked on the farm. George also worked as a carpenter, building homes for Quakers in Whittier. By 1930, George had built another home a half block north at 1247 South Shamrock, where he, his wife Martha, and a young grandson, Kenneth, lived. George passed away in 1944, Martha in 1951, and both are buried in Live Oak Cemetery. George was the only sibling to marry and to have children, so all of the Jones family descendants, and there are many, come from his branch of the family. Some carry Sophia's legacy in medicine forward, others are musicians or artists, some still live on the original family property. The youngest child, William Livingston Jones, was born in 1870, and like his siblings, he was born in Chatham, Canada. Less is known about him in part because he sadly died at the age of 23 of tuberculosis. That might have explained the appeal of Monrovia with its reputation as a haven for those with respiratory diseases. The incomparable Jones family is inspiring, unforgettable, and undeniably important for their last hometown, Monrovia, to know about. Anna and Sophia are among the most influential Americans who ever lived here. But even though there's an exhibit about their family in a Canadian museum, books written about them, Monrovians have barely known who they are or what they did. And so today, we rediscover them and honor them for their powerful intelligence, their skill, their endurance, their hard work, and their sheer determination, the same qualities their ancestors had, shone brightly in their lives. Perhaps knowing them better can encourage us in our time. If they can accomplish all they did and persevere in the face of incredible headwinds, maybe we can as well.